Parked in the Barrow car park at the top of the hill and headed off into the collection. You get a thorough view across the Tamar to Plymouth. Quite high up here, quite windy. And then off into the collection. This is an American section, this top section. This is the first of the Sasanquas that I came across. This is Tanya. I don't know whether it's just a poor specimen of it, but it's tiny little flowers, doesn't have very many flowers. It is in a very exposed position, it has to be said. But it was a bit of a disappointment. This is the first year I've seen fruits on it though. Further on in I encountered the first casualty of recent gales. This is Nicky Crisp with a large branch of a tree sitting on top of it. It's always a hazard in a park full of mature trees. Further on, we're on the Earls Drive here, which is a level carriageway that was built a very long time ago. You can see how steep the bank is up to the right here, and much of the collection is on ground that's nearly as steep as this. This is a European section that we're coming into here. Most of these are japonicas. However, down on the left here, in rather more shade than is ideal, is a group of 3 Camellia Sasanqua New Dawn. Again, it's a disappointingly small flower always, but pretty enough. And these have started to flower fairly freely of late. Just opposite it, Baronesa de Citalino. I think this is a Portuguese variety. Just rather bigger flowers, although they never open completely flat, they're always somewhat cupped. But it's a good performer. Just a short distance further on is Section 8 single camellias in a old quarry. And my eye was caught by the amount of fruit on this Camellia japonica Devonia. And as you can see, the fruit is starting to split, so the seeds are about ready for collection. And I split this one open, and in a single pod there's probably about 8 viable seeds. And I grew some of these a year ago and they all germinated. Anyway, moving on to the species area, so-called, area 10. A mixture of species and Sasanqua varieties. This one is Camellia Sasanqua variegata, one of the relatively few camellias with variegated foliage. The tree that's lying down alongside of it came down before this was planted. It wasn't a lucky miss. It seemed to me that this would be a good spot for it, and so it has proved. Doing very well. A little further on is the first of 3 Camellia Sasanqua Hugh Evans that are in this area. This one is struggling a little bit sparse. Flowering fairly freely. Just down from that is this bush with 3 stems at ground level, and coming up you find a label that says Nerumigata, but in fact the Nerumigata applies only to the left hand one of those 3 trunks. The right hand 2 are this thing, which I have yet to identify. Early flowering, pink flush. Flowers are very much like rainbow, but the foliage is quite different from rainbow. The flowers shatter rather readily, so they don't last very long, but it buds very freely. Currently just has a number on it. I'd like to be able to put a name to it, but whether I ever shall, I don't know. There are a number of contenders. And again, it may just be an unnamed seedling. How it came to be planted in the same hole as Rumigata, I have no idea. Next to that is another Hugh Evans. There are 3 in this area. This is the best of the 3. Flowers very freely and lots of flowers, and a better size than the others. See how many buds it's got on it there. The third one isn't flowering at all yet. It's in a bit more shade. This one's in more sun than the other 2. So the conditions they're growing in do make quite a big difference. Very reliable variety. Next to that is Dazzler, which is only just beginning to open. Most of the flowers were well out of reach. And along from that is Plantation Pink. This is a big rangy bush with comparatively big pink flowers. Always flowers well. Beside that is Sparkling Burgundy, and you can see clearly how here some of the stamens have become petaloid, so the flowers are semi-double. And after that, another single one, which is Crimson King. Further on down, under very, very large plane trees, is sections M and N. Not really very good territory at all for Sasanqua camellias, and surprisingly, this one, which is Papava, does remarkably well in really quite deep shade. Again, rather quite large, very pale, sort of flesh pink flowers. This is a wide spreading bush, much wider than it is high, which is a disadvantage in this area where they're planted a bit close together and where there's an awful lot of leaf fall on top of it. Further on down again at the top of an area known as the amphitheatre, the Japanese section, and this one is Sasanqua Setsugeka, large white flowers with a pink flush. There are 2 bushes here, this one at the front and then one behind it that got hit by a falling tree a few years ago and is now growing vigorously but only just back to flowering. Further on down there's the Ackerman hybrid snow flurry, one of the best plants of winter flowering camellias in the collection. Very free flowering, you can see how many buds it has on it. Alongside that is Winter's Charm, another Ackerman variety. Pink double flowers. And then right on down at the bottom of that section, fairly recently planted Souvenir de Claude Brevet, which is an oleifera hybrid. Flowering okay, but the flowers should be pink and white striped. And all of these are solid pink, which is something of a disappointment. We're now right on Plymouth Sound, and I'm going to go now to where those 2 evergreen trees are in the background, which is what they call the formal garden, which is where, when the collection was first set up, it's where they planted a ceremonial planting. This is back in 1976. This group of camellias were planted. Amongst them is one Sasanqua, which I've not seen flower before this year. So this is actually the first time I've seen this flower. This is obviously plantation pink again. So I can now put a label on this. So that's another one identified. Good. So that completes this trip to the park. Hopefully in a few weeks' time I shall be back there again. I'm going to take another look and see what else is flowering. I hope you enjoyed that quick trip round, and will join me again on the next go.